Hey folks, in today's video I want to talk to you about Lightroom's Clarity Tool, how you can use it much more effectively than just applying it to the whole image. Okay, to get things started, let's actually take a look at exactly what clarity is, what it does, and how it differs from contrast and sharpening. Let's take a look at this portrait. Keeping in mind the histogram we've got up the top right here, if we bump up our contrast, you can see it yields a lot more detail, and you can see it's pushed it in both directions, so you've got contrast in the high end and the low end going on there. Resetting that back to 0. Clarity, it gives a similar kind of effect, but you'll notice it's not getting nearly as saturated, and on the histogram we can see it. It's really only affecting the midtones. Your highlights and shadows are not getting moved in either direction. So again, looking at the contrast, it's getting much more saturated as well. Then looking at our sharpening, I think most people are familiar with, but it tends to work better on edges. Now you've got options here to change the size and use masking and all of that in the latest versions of Lightroom. But if you want to yield a lot of detail in the midtones, like bring out texture and to get rid of haze, Clarity is the one to do it. Let's take a look at this other image. If we go in on something like his vest here, and we bump up our contrast, or if we bump up our sharpening, you see the difference we're getting there. But our clarity brings up a whole heap of detail there. So what you want to keep in mind is it's working with the midtones, and it's basically for bringing out texture. In some cases it can be easily overused. So I so often see this, people just dial up the clarity because in some situations it can give a great result. But in situations where you have, say, a subject and a background in the shot, you may not want to apply it evenly to the whole scene. And one big thing I often see in shots is, especially portraits, people are adding it to work on the person, but then messing up their bokeh, or they're trying to do it to the scene, but then it's making the person look really, really craggy and overdone. So I've picked out a couple of different images here that we can go through to show you some ways to selectively use your Clarity tool to get some great results. So let's start off with a classic one. Here is my assistant Justin. Let's bring him up. So if we just go in and slide the clarity straight up, you can see it's adding heaps of detail on him, but you see what that's doing to the out of focus greens in the background. It's making them really crunchy. It increases the brightness as well, but it loses that really nice soft effect that you get from the blur, which is why we do that kind of thing. So easy one. If you want to do that just to his face to make him look more aged and weathered and that kind of thing, grab your brush tool up the top here. Then I've got the clarity set to just over 50 there. Choose a decent sized brush, and I'll just reduce the feather a little bit because I want to be fairly accurate with it. And then you can just brush that in over his face and bring up that clarity and detail on him and his hair without messing up your background. Simplest one that you can possibly do. You can also go in closer to do it just on eyes or teeth or that kind of thing, or to just bring out the beard, for example. Let's just jump back out and take a look at some of the other images that we've got to work on here. Let's take a look at this one. It also applies when you're doing just kind of a landscape type thing. So here we've got a shot of just some blurred out trees and whatnot. I think this was taken from a lens test, seeing how much blur we could apply to a shot. So if we just apply the clarity to the whole shot, here's what we're getting. And the power lines that are in the background here that I had been trying to obscure with the blur are suddenly starting to show up as weird aberrations in the shot. So in that kind of a situation, all that we may want to sharpen up or add clarity to is the parts that are in focus. So again, grabbing the brush, choosing our clarity amount. We'll probably want a smaller brush on this one, or you can go right in. Then you can just paint it in there. Now on this kind of a situation, you could also put on the auto mask tool. That will actually pick out areas. So if we go in, let's just zoom in on this and say we want to get just this, it knows not to apply it to the blue when I'm being a little bit rough with it. It will fix that up for us, no problem. Okay, jumping back out into our library again. Here's an opposite situation actually. Here's a shot I took for the nude portrait challenge that I did with Digital Rev a while back. Let's zoom out of that one. So we've got a black and white shot here, and rather than, say there was a little bit too much texture in the white curtains, and I didn't want that, I want that to be totally diffused and flat, but I don't want to apply it to the whole scene. If we applied it to the whole scene, here's how it's going to look. If we drag our clarity down, it gives a kind of a Vaseline over the lens type effect that I'm not a big fan of. It just softens everything out. So undoing that and then jumping into our editing, into our brush tool, we can grab a nice big brush and we will leave the auto mask on, and then I'm going to turn the clarity way down. And on this, I'll probably want to bump the exposure up. When you drop clarity, you find that it often darkens it. So as we go through, then this will know not to apply the softening or the clarity, the reduction in clarity to her. It'll just apply it to the white areas. So you can do it kind of rough, and then we'll be able to go back in to just check that it only applied exactly where we wanted it. To make sure we get in these areas, zooming in. Here our brush may be a little too big. Let's just drop the size down. And again, we can go in and just make sure that any texture there is taken out. And whilst we're here, if we want to get rid of that line, that's quite easy. You can use the spot removal tool, but then instead of just doing a spot, you can actually drag and do a whole line, and it will find somewhere nearby to take it out for you. So that's a little, where's it taking it for us though? Yep, so there we go. It's just applied that and taken it out quite cleanly. We can do the same on this side. I'm obviously rushing that. I've gotten too much on the left edge there, but it's going to get that out for us quite cleanly. So that's a nice way of being able to get that softness in the background where you may want it, rather than using the traditional use of clarity, which is to add lots of grit to a shot. Now, getting back to the grit, here let's have a look at some urban type shots. So I took these actually in a stormwater drain in Melbourne, of all places. Let's just drag that out to fit properly. Now, for these ones, this wasn't the final shot. I just chose one that is the right orientation and isn't showing anything that'll get me kicked off YouTube. But for the final shot, I would actually convert this to a black and white. Let's just do it really quickly. Black and white. We'll do a really basic edit here. And let's push the contrast a little bit. Probably going to brighten it a little bit. Okay, so she's about how we want it. Now, let's say we wanted to really bring in some drama on the left-hand side of frame. Another way to use the clarity is to use it as a graduated filter rather than a brush. So here we can put the clarity right up on things like walls. Can really stand up to a lot of clarity. Skies, grass, faces. If you go too high, it just looks really unrealistic. But here we can drag in a filter and have that apply loads of clarity to it for us. Then if we want to, we can also bring down the exposure, which will give more attention on her by taking it off that side of the wall. Now, that wasn't actually the shot that I took from the series. I actually ended up editing these ones up. So you can still see there, I darkened down the sides of the tunnel to bring more attention on her, and I pulled down the blacks to really make her pop there. And then the other one was this one. Won't go zoom in on that one, but using her shape to repeat the other side's shape. And then again, used a couple of brushes in there to bring out different areas of detail. Now, one last way that you might want to use clarity is to just make someone's eyes pop. Now, it's a bugbear of mine when you see a portrait shot and the eyes are just so bright, perfect white, the whites. It looks completely fake to me, as bad as overly processed Barbie doll skin. But if you just want to bring in that bit of extra information on the eyes, you can grab your brush and then just paint in just a bit of clarity. You don't want to overdo it. For that one, because of the eyelashes being quite different to the eye and the iris and everything, you probably want to turn your auto mask off. So that's just going to bring it up a little bit, and then if we have a look at it on and off, so that's an easy way to use your clarity in a really selective way. You can do the same for the teeth and that kind of thing. And it's not just clarity, obviously. As I demonstrated there, any of the adjustments like exposure or brightness or even color toning and stuff, you can do as a brush or a graduated filter that's going to work much more effectively than if you just apply it evenly to the entire shot. If you'd like to see some more editing tips, please let me know in the comments below specifically what you'd like to see. And if you haven't already, jump on over to mattgranger.com/sales. All of my different download series are available in bundles there at great discounts. Thanks, I'll see you soon.